Do you remember the giant hornet panic? The United States once turned every corner upside down trying to eliminate them in order to protect bee colonies. But right now, an unbelievable paradox is unfolding. The U.S. government is using its highest federal law to protect another dangerous creature that also specializes in wiping out bees. Why would this country protect a predator that systematically destroys its own kind? Because behind this truth lies a multi-billion-dollar misunderstanding known as the Save the Bees campaign that the entire world has completely believed. In today's video, we're going to expose an underground world of bee theft networks, disease hotspots that are killing billions of living creatures, and the reason why that dangerous bee species is becoming a major threat to powerful elites and multi-billion-dollar megaprojects. Let's get started. To begin this story, we have to look away from the flowers and look at the dollar bills. A lot of money. When people talk about bees, what do you usually think of first? Honey, right? According to recent economic reports, honeybees in the United States generate hundreds of millions of dollars each year from honey sales. That is a huge number, but the truth is, honey is just pocket change. It does not even touch the tip of the iceberg. The most valuable service bees provide to humans is pollination. It is estimated that bees flying from one flower to another bring American agriculture about $15 billion every year. Without bees, hundreds of crops, from apples, blueberries, and watermelons to almonds, simply could not grow. Imagine this: the bees flying out there are not insects. They are massive profit-making tools keeping the entire American food production industry from collapsing. And when something becomes too valuable, human greed appears. Today, honeybee colonies in the United States are no longer truly wild animals. Basically, they are livestock, just like herds of cattle or flocks of sheep, except they have wings and live inside wooden boxes. People breed them, package them, and haul them across the country on giant 18-wheeler trucks to work as pollination laborers for farms. But this is the part you rarely see on the news. Absolute dependence on honeybees has created a real underground world. In California, bees are now worth almost as much as gold, and wherever there is gold, theft follows. In recent years, American police have had to face an unprecedented crisis: organized bee thefts, also known as bee heists. This is not some joke pulled by bored young people. This is professional crime. These groups use heavy-duty trucks, wear night vision goggles, disable security cameras, and steal thousands of bee boxes, worth millions of dollars in a single night. They repaint the wooden boxes, change the labels, and then resell or rent those very stolen bees back to other farms. The situation has become so bad that police and beekeepers have had to secretly install GPS trackers inside beehives, just like the way they track armored bank trucks. You see, humans are doing everything they can to control and multiply the number of commercial honeybees. But these organized thefts are still not the darkest corner of the pollination industry. The worst part actually comes from a movement you have definitely heard of. Do you remember the Save the Bees campaign? For the past 2 decades, this message has appeared everywhere. On t-shirts, in advertisements from major corporations, on social media, governments encouraged people to set up beehives in their backyards. Big companies spent millions of dollars funding honeybee breeding projects to prove they were environmentally friendly. Millions of kind-hearted people followed along, and they proudly believed they were protecting nature. But this is a serious misunderstanding. In the United States, the honeybee species that everyone is trying so hard to protect is actually not native. They were brought over by Europeans. As I said, they are agricultural livestock, so the movement of raising honeybees to save nature is basically the same as saying I am very worried because wild eagles are going extinct, so I have decided to buy 100 chickens and raise them in my backyard. Chickens are birds. Honeybees are bees. But raising more chickens does nothing to help eagles. In fact, raising too many chickens can even make eagles starve because their food is being taken away. The same thing has happened to the natural world. The explosion of commercial honeybees has created a disaster for thousands of native wild bee species, the bees that are truly standing on the brink of extinction. When humans release millions of honeybee colonies into nature, these commercial bee populations consume all the nectar, causing native bees to starve. And even more terrifying is the story of disease. Look at what is known as the almond pollination concentration hotspot in California. Every year, in spring, California's Central Valley turns into the largest pollination event on the planet. For the almond trees here to bear fruit, they need an enormous number of bees, so about 80% of all commercial honeybees in the entire United States, meaning tens of billions of bees, are loaded onto trucks from across the states and brought together in one place. What happens when you pack billions of tired, stressed living creatures into the same area? That is exactly the ideal environment for viruses, bacteria, and fungi to spread. Honeybees exchange pathogens with one another on almond blossoms. After a few weeks, they are loaded back onto trucks and transported to other states to pollinate apple trees and blueberry plants. Wherever they go, they spread those mutated viruses into the natural environment. The result is a silent ecological crisis. Wild bee species, solitary bees with naturally very weak immune systems, have been wiped out by diseases transmitted from commercial honeybees. Some wild bee species have declined by as much as 90% of their population in just 20 years. Many species have been pushed to the brink of total extinction. And at this very moment, as the wild ecosystem collapses, the deeper cause is finally revealed. Let's return to the bee we mentioned at the beginning of the video. Suckley's cuckoo bumblebee. Why is it a creature that destroys native bees? And why is it disappearing? Most wild bees are hard-working laborers. They build nests, collect pollen, and care for their young. But the cuckoo bee is different. It is a parasite, an absolute exploiter. Nature evolved it to become a professional infiltrator. The cuckoo bee's body has no pollen baskets on its hind legs. Its body cannot even secrete wax to build a nest. Even if it wanted to be a gentle mother raising her own offspring, it simply could not. The only way this bee can survive is by infiltrating and seizing the nests of others. And the way it takes over a nest is as thrilling as a brutal survival script. Normally, if a strange bee flies into another colony's nest, thousands of worker bees will rush out and tear it to death immediately. But the cuckoo bee possesses an extremely terrifying chemical mechanism. When a female cuckoo discovers the nest of a wild bumblebee colony, she releases a scent, a pheromone exactly like that colony's own smell, as camouflage. She becomes invisible to the enemy's defenses. She calmly walks into the middle of thousands of worker bees at work. Her only target is to find the queen bee of that nest. When facing the native queen, the intruder uses her superior physical strength to knock the old queen away or bite her to death. As soon as she overthrows the former queen, the cuckoo bee begins phase 2 behavior control. She releases another special chemical, a kind of inhibitory substance that spreads throughout the nest. This chemical causes the worker bees to lose their will to resist and obediently submit. From that moment on, the cuckoo bee lays her own eggs, and thousands of worker bees from the old colony fly out day and night to gather food and raise the enemy's children. A perfect behavior control system, a ruthless usurper that does not need to spend much effort. But, as with every story about parasitic empires, if you kill off all the workers serving you, you will also starve. When native wild bee species are killed by diseases from commercial honeybees, Suckley's cuckoo bumblebee suddenly finds itself trapped in a dead end. No more nests to invade. No more worker bees to control. This parasite suddenly becomes a victim. The population of Suckley's cuckoo bumblebee has declined by up to 77%. It has lost more than half of its living range and faces the risk of being erased from the earth forever. And now we return to the very first question: why would the U.S. government use federal law to protect a parasitic bee that specializes in destroying its own kind? The answer lies in a cold biological principle. When an ordinary pollinator dies out, that is a bad sign. But when a parasite that depends on those pollinators is also on the verge of disappearing, it means the entire system has been severely damaged down to its very core. This creature is actually nature's red warning siren. You do not save the parasite because you like it. You save it because it is the final link in the chain, proving that the natural environment is collapsing. But when the US government decided to place Suckley's cuckoo bumblebee on the protection list under the Endangered Species Act, it unintentionally created an enormous legal risk for wealthy investors and giant corporations. Why? Because America's endangered species laws are extremely strict. Once this bee is placed on the endangered list, any action that damages its habitat becomes a federal crime. You could be fined $50,000 and even end up in prison simply because an excavator accidentally dug into a piece of land containing one of its nests. Let me give you a real example of how one tiny insect can make billions of dollars disappear. A few years ago in the state of Indiana, a massive highway called US 31 was nearly finished. Then people discovered that the road passed directly through the habitat of a rare butterfly known as Mitchell's satyr. Just one tiny butterfly. But the law is the law. The government ordered that mega highway project to stop immediately. The construction companies had no choice. They had to scrap the design, find a way to reroute the entire highway, and compensate countless contracts. In the end, the project was delayed for 18 years. 18 years frozen because of a single butterfly. The financial losses were so enormous that no one wants to talk about them anymore. Now imagine this Suckley's cuckoo bumblebee once lived across a region stretching over half of North America. If it becomes officially protected, any oil pipeline project, any power station, or any highway could be suspended immediately if someone discovers a cuckoo bee flying nearby. An almost invisible insect could become a multi-billion-dollar financial risk for investors. So what are powerful business interests supposed to do? Sit back and wait to go bankrupt? No. To protect themselves from massive legal penalties, giant energy and transportation companies are entering into one of the strangest agreements in history. They are joining forces with the government to voluntarily turn their own land into a paradise for bees. Across the United States, millions of acres of land beneath high-voltage power lines and along highway shoulders, instead of being sprayed clean with herbicides as they once were, are now being planted with wildflowers. Major corporations are investing millions of dollars to create superhighways of wildflowers stretching for thousands of miles. They are not doing this because they suddenly fell in love with nature. They are doing it because it is an economic calculation. By proactively creating good habitat for bees today, they receive a commitment from the government that if the bee is placed on the endangered list in the future, they will not be fined or forced to halt their projects because they had already been helping the species beforehand. It is a compromise. A compromise between human greed, the power of the law, and the survival of a parasitic insect. The story of the world of bees that we have just uncovered reveals a harsh truth. Not every environmental protection campaign produces the results people expect. Behind those flashy media messages are multi-billion-dollar legal contracts and the silent collapse of wild ecosystems. At this point, you may be wondering, so what should I do? Turn my back on beekeepers or boycott honey products? Absolutely not. The traditional honey industry still supports millions of farmers, and honey itself remains a wonderful gift. The core truth here is this: excessive human intervention often backfires. Trying to buy a box of honeybees and raise them in your backyard does not turn you into an eco-knight. The creatures truly struggling to survive out there are native wild bees and even cold-blooded parasites like the cuckoo bee. And the best way to help fix this situation is actually an extremely simple action: learn to be lazy with nature. If you have a garden, do not try to use chemicals to force the grass to grow perfectly, even like an artificial carpet. Leave behind a messy corner. a dry patch of soil with a few native wildflower seeds scattered in it. That disorderly wildness is actually the best shelter for ground-nesting bees. Nature already possesses an incredibly perfect self-recovery mechanism. As long as we stop forcing misguided campaigns onto it, the ecosystem will know how to rebalance itself. A natural patch of weeds behind your house brings 100 times more real value than empty conservation slogans. The lesson from America's law is the clearest proof. When humans manipulate nature for profit, nature will make us pay the price. Tolerating and protecting a parasitic creature is not a step backward, but the final warning siren to awaken humanity before the food chain shatters. That is the full shocking picture behind the world of bees that today's video has brought you. If you found these truths eye-opening and valuable, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Share this video to break the misconceptions out there. See you again in the next crazy stories.